Hi, prayer partners. Hope you're having a good week and hope things are going well for you this week. Cheryl had a great time at the doctor last Wednesday on her follow-up visit. Took the bandages off. Everything's looking good. The incision's healing up, and he was really impressed with her range of motion. Everything's going well. Thank you so much for your prayers, and just continue to pray and ask the Lord to help her through all the rest of the physical therapy sessions. So she's got one this afternoon, and that always kind of gets her going a little bit, but it really helps with the stamina and movement. So thank you so much. Last week we started talking about the 23rd Psalm, David, the shepherd boy who was writing and reminiscing. But he did so at the latter end of his life when he was an old man. He was looking back over his life and remembering things that had happened. And for each one of those short 6 verses in the 23rd Psalm I mentioned to you last week, there's a companion in the Old Testament, a companion passage that David is thinking back to and remembering. In verse 1, he said, "The Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want." And we talked about God meets all our needs, not necessarily our wants, but our needs. But this week in verse 2, he says, "He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters." Now, in verse 1, it reminds us that God meets our needs. But in verse 2, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, God not only gives us what we need, but he gives us what we want. And again, it's not an always axiom that happens every time we ask God for something, but there are those times in our lives when we ask him of things and he just gives to us. Sometimes we don't even ask and he just blesses us with good things. For instance, there when David made that statement in verse 2, it says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, again, for a shepherd boy, that was an amazing statement because I think David was remembering all of those times when he was a shepherd that he would take his sheep through a grassy pasture. But in that part of the country where there's not very many grassy pastures, shepherds know this. If you let sheep stand still and eat, they will eat the grass right down into the dirt, root and all, and kill off the future pasture. And so a good shepherd would never allow his sheep to stand still and eat, but he kept them on their feet and let them graze as they moved along so that they couldn't eat it down into the dirt. David, I think, was reminiscing and remembering all of those times when he really would like to have had the luxury just to let his sheep stand there and eat all they wanted. But he knew if they were going to have something later, they had to stay on their feet and keep moving. But when David comes to the end of his life and he's writing the 23rd Psalm, he looks toward heaven and he says, "Lord, because you're my shepherd, not only do I have everything I need, but there are those times in my life when you let me lay down in the middle of my grassy pasture. I don't have to worry about where my next meal's coming from because not only does God give me what I need, but there are those times God gives me what I want." And David was saying, he's been so good to me. He's blessed me so much. He's let me lay down in the middle of the pasture. I think another thing David was reminiscing and thinking about was as a shepherd, he knew and understood that the only time sheep will lay down is when they're 100% satisfied and content. If they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they're anxious of fear nearby, they will not lay down. They stay on their feet. They meander around. They keep moving. But David said, "Lord, because you're my shepherd and I get what I need, you're also my shepherd. And there are those times that you give me what I want." Just the privilege, just the blessing, just the luxury of being able to lay down in my green pasture. And David says, "So, Lord, I have what I need always. And there are those times when you bless me by your grace and by your mercy, not because I've deserved it, not because I've earned it, but because you just said, 'Here, enjoy this.'" And there are those times in our lives when God just says, "Here, enjoy this." Not always. And it's not this name it and claim it stuff like some of these guys on TV and radio are talking about. But it's those times when God just wants to bless his children and he gives us things we want. And then the last part of verse 2 there, he says, and he leads me beside still waters. And again, it was David's way of reinforcing, he gives me what I need. Did you know that I didn't know this till one time I was in Israel and I was talking to I believe he was a Bedouin shepherd, and he told me something that I did a little research on and found out he's 100% right. Did you know that the only time sheep will drink water is if that water is still? Here in Missouri, we call them babbling brooks or streams that have a little ripple on the water or they're making noise. Did you know you can take a lamb that's so thirsty and dry and put him beside water that's making noise? That little lamb will stand right there and die of thirst. They will not drink from water that has noise or that has motion to it. They will only drink from still water. I think David here is remembering every time he tramped up and down the banks of the Jordan or along the Sea of Galilee or wherever he had his sheep, trying to find a place where the water was calm and still so his sheep could get a drink and be refreshed. He comes to the end of it all and he's looking back over his life. He says, God, because you're my shepherd, I have all I need. Sometimes I have what I want, but Lord, you always show up when my soul needs refreshed, and you lead me beside those still waters. There are those times when we get so overwhelmed with busyness, so overwhelmed with cares and concerns and problems and the way this world's going, and we just need to get away from the noise of the world. We just need to draw close to God and spend some time with him. And David says, Lord, you lead me into those places of still water, where my soul can be refreshed, where my spirit can get a spiritual drink, where I can escape the chaos of the world and everything that's going on. And so David says in verse 1, he gives me what I need. And in verse 2, he says, sometimes he gives me what I want, but not only my physical needs, but also he leads me beside those still waters where my soul can be refreshed. My friends, I think some of the best medicine for us is just to shut that 6 o'clock news off, get rid of all of the noise and the chaos of the world, just take your Bible, draw close to God and say, Lord, I need to hear from you. Just spend some quiet time with him. And it's important we do that on a daily basis. Sheep need to drink water every day. We need to drink that spiritual water every day. And David said, he leads me to those places where my soul can be refreshed. Sometimes he gives me what I want. He always gives me what I need. And he loves me enough that he wants to spend time with me. He leads me to those places of still water. Hope you're able to find some still water this week. And to all you fathers, God bless you and have a happy Father's Day on Sunday. For those of you who are going to be traveling to go see Dad, hope you have a safe trip and enjoy your time with your family. Take some time to spend beside those still waters this weekend. God bless. We'll talk to you later.